Okay, good evening and welcome to the Sherwood School District Board meeting for November 10th. Welcome everyone, both here, our team of 10, and for those of you that are watching live stream. We'll go ahead and start off with please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Excellent, thank you. And just really quick before we move to the consent agenda, before I don't want to forget, I would say it at the end of the meeting, but in honor of Veterans Day tomorrow, I would just like to say thank you to all of you that have served and to your families. And with that, yeah.
And happy birthday to the Marines.
Perfect. Okay. And with that, we'll go ahead. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Any additions, questions, comments, discussion? Okay, we'll go ahead and vote. All those in favor of passing the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 And opposed? Okay, motion passes. Consent agenda. We will go ahead and move right along to our next segment we're all excited about, and that is Spotlight On. So with that, I will welcome Captain Hanlon to the podium. The floor is yours. You are welcome to bring our new SRO. Thank you.
Stand over here for a moment. Good evening. How's everybody doing? Hey, my name's Ty Hanlon, and I'm a captain here with Sherwood PD. I've been here since 2009, actually. Yesterday, 2 days ago. Yesterday was my anniversary, so it's very exciting. But I want to talk to you tonight about the SRO, or the School Resource Officer, that has just started here in the last week. We had a lull with obviously COVID and displacing that program, but we're excited about our partnership. It's been a great partnership that we've had with the school district for many years, and very excited to have Officer Wolfer join us this year, and moving forward with the new high school and the combined middle school. He's going to have a lot of work to do, so I'm sure he'll be keeping busy. But one of the things that I think is really important that we stress is just our working relationship that we have with the school district and the principals, and just the collaboration that I think has been really strong over the last, well, several years since I've been here, and just working to solve problems together and working creatively when things come up, and everything's always new and everything's a little bit of a challenge in today's society. So we're looking forward to tackling those things as they come up, and working with all of you. And without any further ado, I'm going to let Officer Wolfer just take a few minutes and tell him about himself.
Hey everyone, I'm James. That's what I'm going by at the schools too, going by first name. So I'm just really excited to be here. I've been at the Sherwood PD for about a year. Full-time, was a reserve for a year before that. Previously served 3 years combined at 2 different police departments, and have several years experience in the Coast Guard Reserve. But this is at least so far, I know I'm only in week 2, but so far it's been a really fun and exciting assignment. So I'm really excited to partner with the schools staff. Already worked really well with the administration, and hit the ground running, and also just working with the kids. So that's about, I think so. So yes.
That's fantastic. Is
The-
there something in particular that drew you to being a school resource officer?
Well, one of the reasons I went into law enforcement was some of the officers' presence in my high school. So I actually graduated from Newburgh High School, and quite a while ago now, but they had some forensic programs and things, and a lot of the detectives came over from the PD as well as the school resource officer, and I just really liked that partnership. And I always really liked our school resource officer. So I can't remember his name back then, but I know he was a pretty cool guy, and always just kind of had an impact. So I'd like to think that was kind of the start of this career path for me. So that was one of the things, is just being that positive role model. It can be kind of scary with police officers, with all the stuff we got to wear now, but kind of showing them that, hey, I'm just a human being, and that's why I'm going by my first name, and just talking to everybody and the kids, and really showing them that, you know, while sometimes certain depictions can make us scary, really we're here to help and protect them. So that's probably what drew me the most to, is just to be able to build that bridge.
Thank you for all that you do.
Thanks.
You're appreciated.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, I just want to echo that we're really happy to have you here, and of course we enjoy the partnership as well. I've been able to work on the YSAT group and all of that, and what it's meant to this community to be able to communicate with each other. And we're super excited to have you, and it just sounds like you're already on the right path, and really looking forward to, you know, your input after you've been in the school for a while, and what you have to say, and
Mhm.
really an assessment of, you know, where we are and what our needs are, you know, in the schools as from a police officer perspective. So really excited about that. So thank you for coming here. I know you have some long days, so I appreciate it. And welcome.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. And don't feel obligated to stay. It's all right. Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, yes, absolutely. All right. We will go ahead and move on to board reports, and I will start with Superintendent Cordy.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. My report tonight is fairly brief, and it has a singular focus, and that is on our staff in our district. And I just, you know, it's a really good day in my week when I'm in a school, and it's even better when I'm in multiple schools over the course of a week. And I have been able to spend time in all of our schools, certainly since the school year started. And, you know, one of the things that staff share with me when I'm there and able to visit and check in is how hard things are right now. And there's a sense of exhaustion across the district and across the state, for sure. Just in a way that we usually don't feel at this time of the school year. You know, there's kind of points in a school year where that definitely feels heavier than other times. And I just really want to say that and name that, and also to say that, you know, we know that in addition to helping students where some learning gaps happened, for example, during the closure and distance learning and all of the other pieces that are now a part of every day in our classrooms and in our schools. I just want to say thank you. I also want to really recognize that, you know, there are positions that we literally just are not able to fill. There's just a shortage, and just no matter what, there are just positions in all of these different areas, from custodians to instructional assistants to classroom teachers, that are still vacant. And there are days when it's hard to find enough substitutes cover absences, and that wears on staff, and as they use their prep periods, for example, to cover other classrooms. And I just want to say that I hear that, and thanks to the staff, licensed classified administrators in our district. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to our ASB Student Representative, Ms. Pirenbu. Floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you all for having me. And I'm really proud to represent the student body here tonight. October was a really busy month for us, and we're looking forward to starting all of our winter traditions soon. We started out the month with homecoming. It was a great success, and we had amazing reviews from all of the students. And in the next few weeks, we are going to start transitioning into winter sports. And we are kicking off the season with a pep assembly this Friday. We have also been busy with a lot of community outreach. Our blood drive was a great success with amazing donors that were both walk-in and registered. We also had our Cancer Awareness Week last week, where we raised $3,480.90 for the Children's Cancer Association. And finally, we have decided on our sparrow, and we introduced Jilly to our student body last week. Up next, we are working on a few more community service opportunities. The week before winter break, we are partnering with Helping Hands Food Bank to coordinate our canned food drive. And in January, we are hosting our annual Bowman pageant, partnering with Dornbecker Children's Hospital. And we just really appreciate everything you guys do and all of the teachers and staff do to support all of the kids here in Sherwood. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. It is fantastic to hear everything you're talking about. I'm just feeling so thankful for that right now. And with that, I will turn it over. Director Nyangaro, would you like to add anything for a board report?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I'm really excited about the SRO hiring. I want to thank Dr. Cordy for allowing me to be a part of that process, and Officer Hanlon was very hospitable, and we had some great guys that we looked at, and I think Officer Wolfer is going to be excellent for our kids and for the district. So another thing is too, I just want to thank the teachers and the parents and the students that are sticking it out with us and making the district work, and we appreciate you, and that's all I have.
Great, thank you. Director Adamson.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say I'm so impressed with the amount of community service that our students do. I think it's just amazing, and on behalf of everyone in healthcare, thank you so much for the blood drive. Really needed right now. I just want to share with my fellow board members, in continuing with the service I began last year on the Equity Visioning Committee. That committee reconvened for the first time this school year on Monday night. We had a great chance to meet some of the parents who are returning and some new members. It's a great committee with lots of participation. And the committee talked about our why and group norms, and I think some new legislation that will institute equity advisory committees at all districts starting in the next few years. So we are, as we often are in Sherwood, ahead of that, and excited to continue that great work, and we'll update the board when the opportunity arises.
Thank you. Director Thorne.
I do not have anything to report tonight. I'm going to save my air for a few minutes from now.
And Director Hawkins.
I do not have anything new to share, but similarly to Chair Hecker, I'm so thrilled to hear all the activities that are happening at the high school. It just makes me feel warm and excited to hear all the things that you guys are participating in. And like Dr. Cordy, I very much hear the exhaustion from teachers, and there's definitely not a quick solve for that. But I thank you guys so much for all the time and effort you're putting into the students. And even though I know you're feeling exhausted, I don't feel like our students are totally feeling that exhaustion. So that's some kind of magic that I really appreciate. And I know they do too.
Okay, and I will round off this. One thing I'm super excited to report kind of along the high school that we do have a state cross country champion, James C. Fantastic, and congratulations to that team and all the teams this fall. Again, talk about just joyful to see. And I know we're not done. We're not done in all the sports, but congratulations. It's been really fun to follow. And I also want to just say I had the opportunity to volunteer at the Sherwood Showcase, and fabulous day for 9 amazing bands to compete at the new high school. And it was phenomenal just to be there. And it was really fun to work concessions and hear, even though they're competitors, but to hear from other people from even Grants Pass, but nice people. But just how impressed they were with the facility and how organized everything was, and all the volunteers. And it was super fun to just be part of something there. Again, it's just been too long. So a great job to that whole group, and what an amazing thing to put on for all of those teams. So it was really fun, and the weather cooperated. Thank goodness. 2 days later, it would not have been fun the next week. Definitely not the same. So a beautiful sunny day, and thank you to the band boosters for letting me do that. So with that gushing report, I will pass it on to, I think we have an SCA report. So Mr. Pace is here from the Sherwood Education Association, and you're welcome to take the podium. Thank you.
Good evening, Dr. Cordy, Chair Hecker, and board directors. Thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight and give you an update from the Sherwood Education Association. As we're getting closer to the end of our first trimester, we have now passed a few of our major fall events. Teachers held their virtual back to school nights, fall conferences are complete, and teachers would normally be settling into more of a rhythm now as we're headed into the holiday season. And I say normally because teachers are also feeling the impacts of all that this school year has brought. As you know, there are additional safety precautions that teachers have to adhere to in their classrooms. Teachers have to plan and deliver instruction to students who are in quarantine, and teachers themselves have been in quarantine and have to make extended plans for their substitutes to be in their classrooms. With the shift in the start time for our middle school and high school, it's changed how our middle school and high school teachers can use their time before and after school. In addition, the change to our early release model has also changed how our teachers are collaborating together. Another huge impact that you've also heard about is the shortage of substitute teachers that we have right now. Some jobs are being left unfilled, and our secondary teachers are giving up their prep time to substitute for their colleagues. And we do know that these challenges aren't unique to Sherwood and are being felt across the state. All these changes have brought teachers to a level of exhaustion that we usually don't see at this point in the school year. Many teachers have commented that they feel May tired and not November tired right now. We've continued to meet regularly with district administrators, and we're working together as much as we can to come up with sustainable solutions. And we appreciate the efforts that are being made and the talks that are ongoing. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Can I ask you a question? If you're at liberty to say, if you could name like the top 3 things that come to your mind first about what types of support the teachers need during these times right now, what are the 3 most major things you're hearing the most?
I think in general, it's just been the amount of time that it takes to do everything that we're doing this year. So I don't know that I have 3 specific things off the top of my head right now. There are just a lot of meetings right now. It's just, as we've been, back to normal, we're also continuing forward with new not district programs, but one small example, we're doing more with our health curriculum this year. That's one more little thing in addition to everything else that we have going on this year. So it's kind of just a compounding effect of everything, back to relatively normal, yet everything in addition to that as well.
I hope we can hear more about how we can better support.
And yeah, those are some of the things that we continue to talk to our district about, as we get ideas and talk to our teachers as well. We're bringing ideas to the table, working back and forth together. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pace. I appreciate it. Okay, we will go ahead and move right along to public comment. The comments this evening have all been turned in electronically, and Ms. Andrade and Mr. Rose will read those comments aloud. Again, as we've talked about in the past, these are opportunities for people in the community to share their thoughts and ideas with the board. This isn't a dialogue, so we don't respond. We are here to listen. So with that, I will turn it over to the team. Thank you.
Sorry, give the timer a second to load. Melanie Taylor, Saunders Drive, Sherwood. My son and his class were given a choice of books to read and discuss them in small groups for his English literature. He chose the book, I Will Give You the Sun, supposedly a book about a pair of siblings' fractured lives. He read about the first chapter or so and came down and told us he was uncomfortable reading this and discussing this in class. Within the first 10 pages or so, it talks about this boy getting a hard-on when being put in a headlock while being bullied by another boy. I immediately started reading this, and the book has so many references to being sexually aroused, gay and straight, etc. It also references several times as the Bible being hogwash. There are several other options that I'm almost positive talk about and detail some sexual experiences. A Girl Like That, explanation, a timeless exploration of high-stakes romance, self-discovery, and the lengths we go to love and be loved. Pretty sure this probably has some racy, sexual, inappropriate stuff as well. Another book, All American Boys, intro. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Are we talking critical race theory here? I haven't personally read this, but makes me wonder. So my question is, why are these books considered appropriate for school? How can these be okay? I don't care if these are award-winning novel bestsellers. These are not appropriate for school teens at all. This is just pure smut and soft porn for that matter.
Alyssa Khan, Cascara Terrace. School board meetings should change back to the regular practice of including the public in-person attendance. Any board member who continues to have a problem including the public in-person attendance should resign from their position. Thank you. Elizabeth Farnham, Cobblestone Drive. As I listen to the Board of Directors work session, I feel compelled to speak up regarding two topics, facility rentals and the school calendar process. With regards to the facilities, as a taxpayer that provides funding for the schools, pays a registration fee for both high school sports and youth sports, I find it tough to hear that the school district is using the facilities to make money off their own community. I completely understand charging club or private teams, including those that have 50% residents, but our community youth program should provide our youth an opportunity to play sports at a lower cost, including lower field rental cost. The cost the youth programs will incur will be directly passed to the players. I also ask, what is the annual cost of Facilitron? With regards to the school calendar process, it is no secret by the time our students enter their junior year, the state of Washington will have an additional year of seat time. My question is, why is there not a community member or two in the committee, on the committee that plans the calendar? Thanks for the opportunity to share these thoughts.
Stephanie Sonalia, Lower Roy Street, Sherwood. I am writing you for a couple of reasons. It has been brought to my attention that there has been discussions of gay pride and LGBTQ talks and teaching in the U.S. history class. I do not feel that this is appropriate subject matter to be taught or addressed in school and does not have anything to do with children's academics. It is not okay with me as a parent for teachers to be teaching or discussing sexual preferences or lifestyles and such at school with my kids in class. Those are conversations to be had at home and the choice of the parents. The other issue I'm having is that the team sports teacher is taking grade points away from students based on their mask wearing. Absolutely unacceptable. I hear that this is not the only teacher doing this to students. Again, the mask wearing has nothing to do with their grades or their academics, and it is not okay to make it or allow it to affect one's grades. More inappropriate that this teacher is doing this in a physical activity education class. I did send all of the above in an email to the high school interim principal today and received a response that basically told me to reach out to the teachers about this and get back to him with how those conversations went. I sent the original email to him to get the issues resolved by him. I am now asking the board and all involved to please help and resolve these issues. Thank you for your time. And that concludes public comment.
Thank you so much. And with that, wrapping up the public comment, we will go ahead and move on to the information and discussion portion of the agenda. And I will turn the floor over to Director Thorne, who is going to lead us in a discussion on public attendance and public comment.
Thank you, Chair Becker. Okay, so after the August board meeting, a decision was made to move meetings to a hybrid model, which restricted in-person attendance by the public and in-person comment. It is my belief, in the interest of board involvement, transparency, and collaboration, this decision was bad practice. As a board, we are accountable to the citizens of this community, which involves students, parents, district staff, and City of Sherwood residents. While the August meeting may have been a contentious meeting due to a few upset parents, the ending result of punishing the community as a whole for the actions of a few was inappropriate and not in the best interest of our community as a whole. Additionally, while I know that case numbers were rising and was the other facet of that decision, I believe that with the proper protocols in place, our meetings should and could have remained open to the public. At a very minimum, I do believe that decisions made about community access to our meetings should have begun with a board decision. On that note, I would like to take a moment to reiterate and remind our community of the district's commitment to you via policy titled District Community Relations, Goals and Objectives under section KL, coded as KA/KAA. The board's goal of achieving positive district community relations serves to 1, develop public understanding of all aspects of school operation, assertion public attitudes towards issues in education, and identify the public's expectations for their students. 2, secure adequate financial support for a sound educational program. 3, help citizens feel a direct responsibility for the quality of education provided by their schools. 4, earn the confidence of the public with regard to staff and services. 5, foster public understanding of the need for constructive change and solicit public advice on how we can achieve these educational goals. 6, involve citizens in solving educational problems. 7, promote cooperation between the school and the community and to set up channels for sharing the leadership in improving community life. Achieving these objectives requires that the board and staff individually and collectively express positive attitudes towards the schools in their daily contacts with parents, people of the community, and one another. Make systematic, honest, and continuing efforts to discover what the public thinks and what the citizens want to know, and to interpret school programs, problems, and accomplishments. Develop an active partnership with the community in working toward improvement of the educational program, and take an active interest in the needs of the total community to find ways to make the community a better place in which to live. Additional resources regarding our meeting policies can be found under section B titled Board Meetings, where it is specifically stated that all meetings will be open to the public. Restricting public attendance at our meetings directly conflicts with this policy. It is my hope that we as a board will decide tonight that this will be the last meeting where public attendance is restricted. I believe that after this discussion has concluded, a majority of this board will be in agreement with this sentiment, but I will let the other board members comment and speak for themselves as they see fit during the discussion portion that will follow my comments. Additionally, in the spirit of transparency, accountability, and collaboration, 3 main points that we as a board agreed is our common goal. That moving forward, any decisions surrounding vastly changing how meetings are conducted would be done via a collaborative and collective conversation. Moving on to public comment. We have heard from our community multiple times the public comment policy causes frustration for them in the way that we as a board are not allowed to engage during public comment. And I would like us as a board to explore options to rectify this. My suggestions for this is to establish a public comment board email that goes to all board members, where individuals who have made public comment can then, prior to or after they make their public comment, email us a written version of their comment and include their contact info so that we can respond and engage accordingly. This would replace the online submission form, which is technically only needed when meetings are virtual and online submissions are accepted only, so that those who cannot attend meetings are still provided the opportunity to provide public comment. However, these submissions would not be read aloud at the meeting. I want to note that I do believe it is important to keep the live in-person public comment in place, as often public comment is useful to others in the community who may share the concerns of the commenter. And additionally, it's important that our community is provided the opportunity to engage with us live and in person. This also allows transparency in the manner that it brings attention to the community of items they may not otherwise be aware of. I do look forward to hearing additional suggestions from fellow board members on this. There's, I'm sure, going to be many, and I would love for this to be a collaborative conversation. Community engagement is my last topic. In accordance with the board policy previous read, I believe it is time for the board to revisit how we engage with the community as well. I believe that we should start holding public forums where community members are invited to attend, ask questions of the board, and where the board is there to listen and answer questions directly. While I think that once per quarter is not enough, I recognize that once per month may conflict with board schedules. So it is my suggestion that we do this once every other month to start after a work session. If we as a board receive enough interest and attendance to these forums, we can then revisit the timing and explore holding them more than once a month. It's important to me as a board member and a member of this community to have consistent engagement with the community. You only grow and get better by listening to the people around you and the people that are involved with you. And I believe that us as a board are responsible to be there to do that for this community. And with that, I'd like to welcome more discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Thorne. Couple things I actually prepared just to give people an idea of what's going on around us as a reference, because there are a lot of different things I think to consider. And we really talked about as far as public comment, public attendance, if we're going to make adjustments, let's do what's right for the board and the community and district, all of those things at the same time. So I think there are a lot of different facets. I do think it's important to note a couple things that we did not, that we have continued to accept public comment electronically. And actually, that's something that we have to do, I believe, by law in January, that we always have to accept public comment. That will be a new thing. So that's something that we would not be able to change, just for clarification. A few other things, but we're going to go ahead and move forward. I mean, the reality is, as far as making changes in a pandemic, I will stand by. It was for the health and safety, security of everyone involved. But at this point, what I'd like to do is pass out just some information. Director Nangar, I will send you a copy. I apologize. But what I was able to do, and I wanted to help Director Thorne with this conversation, is to look at what folks around us are doing. So I included not only the Sherwood School District, City of Sherwood, what Tigard Walton's doing, Westland, Wilsonville districts, and then the remaining districts that are in our conference. As far as what type of, there are several facets. I looked at meeting format. Do they do public comment right now in person? Is there a public attendance limit? Is there a time limit overall for public comments? Is there an agenda only limitation? How long prior to a meeting or when is the cutoff time for electronic submission? Are they read aloud? Are they not read aloud? And then the time allowed per public comment. And that I just added some notes at the bottom. The idea was to just kind of get an idea. People are, different districts are doing things differently. It's about half and half right now as far as in person. Or kind of a hybrid or virtual, but just really wanted to kind of take a look at this and see, what pieces or parts, what makes sense for Sherwood and what's most appropriate for our community and ultimately for educating children. So with that, I'll accept some comments and I'll send this to you, Director Nyangaro.
Thank you for clarifying the piece on the online public availability. I will say that I appreciate the information about what neighboring districts and such are doing. That's helpful. I am, for one, more concerned with what our district is doing and what our community has stated that they want, and what is right for our community. So it's always great to know what other districts are doing, but I don't think that should influence us. I think that we are a wonderful district. I think that we are one of the best districts. And I think that we need to do right by our community members and by our district. And as far as the issue with the pandemic that you brought up, I believe that it's all out there for all to see how much numbers are going down. Additionally, everything's open. Everything is open. People have social distancing things in place. Mask wearing, if masks work, then they work. People are vaccinated, 80%. So I suppose I do not see any valid reason why we cannot allow our community members who want to attend and listen what's going on in the building to do so.
And I guess, I mean, I think that's an overarching, which is good. What I would love to do is maybe, have a discussion about, what do we think? So that would cover our meeting format and, public comment being in person. So kind of my first two bullets here. I don't know that we have to talk about a limit on public attendance. I think there was one district that limited the number of folks that could come in. But maybe, it might be helpful to talk about, okay, do we have an overall time limit on all of the public comments? Do we allow half an hour? I think in this, primarily the district that gave the most amount of time to public comment was 40 minutes. So that might be something. I'm just thinking maybe we could talk about, is that something we want to do? And really importantly to me, also the next item is, how long we accept public comment. We are the only district and the only group that accepts public comment up until 15 minutes before a meeting. And I just think that's something I would certainly like to address. No one else allows comment after 4 p.m. I just think it's too much. It's too much of a stress. And we have meetings that go right up to 7. So to be able to scramble and take electronic comments that late, I think is easily something that we should address. So I'm just thinking if we could talk about, what as a group does it look like? Do we put a time limit on all public comments? So what types of pieces? I'm just thinking if we could maybe talk about some of those pieces and put that together to come up with a plan. I would love to engage in that conversation and get people's thoughts.
I totally agree with you that the public comment portion needs some revisions. And I really think that we should discuss it. I agree with that 100%. I do think that there isn't really any reason why, for the time being, while we come to those decisions or adoptions, that we can't allow for things to essentially remain the way they were, meaning that we can open our doors, allow people to come in, do the public comment in which the format that it's already been established, while we work towards these revisions as far as the public comment piece goes going forward.
So Director Thorne, you aptly said earlier, and I completely agree with this, that we only get better by listening. And I would say that also involves listening to your fellow board members and to the full team of 10 here. I'm concerned because we're coming here tonight hearing a proposal that was not put in front of any of us in advance of this meeting. And so I've got a bunch of questions for you. But specifically to answer your question as to, well, why can't we just return things the way they were before we work things out? If you had called me in advance of tonight and shared what you shared here tonight, I would have shared with you that I have concerns because the last time we had an in-person meeting with public comment we got a lot of public comment that evening and the days that followed from citizens saying that they didn't feel comfortable being here. They didn't feel safe in this building. The police were called, not by a member of this board, but by somebody else. I'm concerned that what we heard from the community was, wait a minute, this didn't work. And then we made some changes in response to new mandates. And what's happened since then is a lot of public comments come in, and we've had 2 staff members that have been willing to read that comment dispassionately. I couldn't tell whether they would agree or disagree with those statements. I think they've done a great job in communicating what the public's thinking to us. And I don't have a sense for whether you've consulted with the district or consulted with other school board members. I know you haven't consulted with me, and that's okay. But have you consulted with the rest of the team of 10 about the impact of returning to where we were before? Whether that would return the problems we had in that last meeting or how we would mitigate those? What concerns our staff have that would be in charge of operationalizing whatever decision we make here? Those are all things that we have to consider before we just do something.
Thank you. You made a lot of assumptions there.
I was kind of surprised. So
I understand. Right, yes. And I'm going to back up a little bit from the lecture I just received and go back to neutral
if you
here.
didn't surprise us, we could have had this conversation in advance.
Well, it was on the agenda, with all due respect, Jessica, and if you had questions, you know my phone number. You also know my
Director
email.
Thorne, you have an obligation as the person putting it on the agenda to communicate. It's
I am
on
not the
everyone else.
person that
Excuse
made the
me.
decision
Excuse
to
me.
change it.
Excuse me. You have an obligation as the person wanting a change to communicate.
Did the
Well,
person that
that's not your
made the
job.
decision have an obligation to communicate it, that wanted to change? It goes both ways,
Respectfully,
respectfully,
You know,
absolutely.
at this point, I think we need to just move forward. Let's move forward with the discussion and let's talk about what this would look like, please. We have board norms and I just really want to keep this on the up and up, and let's move forward with what this could look like in crafting something.
I
please.
would like to hear from Jessica and or from Abby and Duncan as well.
I was gonna
Yeah.
jump in. Oh, go ahead, Duncan.
No, you go ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't tell you were ready to talk. I have heard from Director Thorne, and I knew that this was her intention, that she would like to see this return. I've also shared with her and anybody else who's asked me that I am very happy to have the community in this room. I do think there needs to be expectations of the community. We can't have it be a free for all, and we want people to feel safe here. And I think that that's the right thing to do, is to outline those expectations. So I would love to see that happen. As far as public comment, as a new board member, it is a strange process, even if it's a process that's always been in place, that we listen to public comment and then we don't ever respond. I know that was probably one of the weirdest things to me when I joined this board, is I thought, how strange that people put all this time and effort into a comment, but then it doesn't really fall on dead ears, but it can kind of feel that way because it's quiet after and then we move on. And I know the district does do things to respond to those comments, like in their actions. But I think because it is addressed. Like, for instance, I was talking with Chair Hecker about, there was comment prior about opening up the screening process for weekly testing. And so that was addressed. The school is now offering it. It was in the newsletter. In many ways, it did go out to the student body, but we don't ever come back in a board meeting and say, like, in response to this comment, this is something we've put in place. And I guess my desire would be that we read the comments that were submitted to us, or listened to, maybe it's up to 20, a certain number that we think is feasible each night, but that maybe we set aside 10 minutes of our meeting to respond to 2 or 3 comments from the prior month, to just give a little update on some of the things that we were able to look at or make an adjustment to things, because certain things come up in the community that I see you guys working very hard to address. But I don't always know if it's recognized because we don't take a minute to let them know how we're recognizing it. So I know that's different than the way things have been done, but that is something that I almost wish we could take the time to do.
Director Nightingale.
Yeah, the feedback I'm getting from the community is they want to come back and be a part of the process and sit in. There's just something about being there and being a part of the process in person where it's just a different thing. It's more engaging. And, I understand it was pretty tense back in August with what was going on. But, I think things have sort of settled down since then. And, I believe Director Thorne said, we don't want to punish the entire community for the actions of a few. And again, the overwhelming feedback is that the parents, the community, they want to be there, they want to be a part of it. And when they ask me when things are opening back up or when they'll be able to attend again, I don't know what to tell them. So I think we need to listen to that. We work for them, we work for the community, the public, and we need to listen to them and do what they're asking us to do, which I don't think is unreasonable. And I think it's important. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Okay. Sure. Great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Director Adams.
I just, I appreciate that we all talk to different people in the community. Up until the public comment this evening, which was received after 5 p.m. Because I was here right at 5 and we'd only had one comment and it was the previous one. So not that it's not legitimate and important, that's the only public comment that I have received relative to please let us back in. So I just, again, my perspective is a little bit different because I have not had members of the community say to me, please open this back up. In fact, what I have had people say to me is, wow, what are you guys going to do when things do open back up? And how are you going to keep things under control? And so that to me is my concern. I absolutely enjoy the public being here. I think it's great when students are able to be here and see democracy in action. I appreciate public comment. I think we've received a lot of it. And I agree with Director Hawkins. It would be nice for us to explore a process by which we do come back or do find some way to respond or develop an FAQ on our website if we get a few different questions and we can start building out a mechanism to respond, because if we hear from a couple of people about that, we're going to hear from more. And I think finding a mechanism for us to do that, I think would be great. I support the idea of a public forum. I'd like to talk a little bit about how we make sure that in a public forum, the information that we're sharing as a district is fully up to date. I think, as board members, we have opinions, but we may or may not know all the facts. And so figuring out how we structure that in a way where we can share facts or do information specific, I think that's a great idea, Director Thorne. I do think before we move forward, I still have questions about how do we operationalize having people in this building? The neighboring districts have had issues with appropriate mask wearing and rule following. How are we going to handle that? I want to hear from our staff what concerns they have, because the other piece of this is if we don't find ways to manage public comment, it really did get out of hand in August. And granted, we were dealing with very high stakes issues, and maybe it wouldn't be that way this time around. But how do we manage this so that staff who have to come here in the evening and be here, we don't want them to be here so late that we can't have teachers who we've just heard are exhausted, having to be here till 10 o'clock at night at a board meeting to provide information on the last agenda item because public comment went on and on. So I think those are things that I would really are true concerns for me. And I am not opposed to having people who want to wear masks and follow rules and be quiet so that we're not in a debate between the audience and the board, which is what happened in August. So we avoid that. If we can achieve that, I'm great letting the public back in, but I have not yet heard a way for us to do that and to manage the time issue. Because I think that there is a legitimate protection issue there. How do we make sure that the voices of those that are present are not outweighing the voices of those who don't feel comfortable being here in person? How do we stagger public comment so that we hear equally from those who prefer to submit online versus be here in person? I'd like to explore whether we're able to preference students so that we can center student voices and they can go first, and center public comment that is about the agenda that we're considering, so that if we run out of time, we're not missing comment on things that are on the agenda. Those are my concerns. Regardless of how this agenda item got here, I sincerely hope that we will tend to making sure that we've heard from all voices, and that we will resolve these issues before we let folks back in the door, because it was a problem and we can't just pretend that it may go away.
Is it possible to say, for instance, if the lucky number was 20, I don't know if that's what's reasonable, to say, we are going to read aloud the first 10 comments that were submitted electronically, and we are going to welcome the first 10 people who showed up and signed their name in who would like to speak publicly. Like, we'll take 10 of each if we have that many, and that's the allotment for tonight. And otherwise, I'm happy to read people's comments, and I love to read people's feedback, but I am able to do that. And like you were saying, it is very difficult and exhausting when we sit through an hour and a half of comments, which I do want to hear and I want to be fresh for, but then we get to the end where we're making choices about things and you're almost just too mentally drained to give that the effort that it deserves. I don't want to be in that position either. I don't think that's the best choice for our district or for our kids.
I think that's very reasonable, Director Hawkins.
So, but what about, how do you guys feel about having people? Yeah.
Well, I would just weigh in on that piece right there. I think limiting public comment makes some sense. I think being the first 10 submitted becomes a race to submit rather than looking at the content. What some districts do is they'll balance the comments where people will have to some way submit their topic, so that if there's 25 comments on one side and 25 on the other side, you read 5 of each instead of the first 10 submitted, which may be on one side or the other. So you're hearing from both sides of an issue. So to me, some issue of balancing both sides, we hear from both sides of an issue on public comment. If we're going to limit it, would be an important factor for me, and not on who's got their comments in first. I don't know how that, I'm not sure how that all plays out, but that's just my thinking. In terms of people coming in person, as one of the 5 who's really in charge of managing mask wearing and rule following and things like that, that was super distracting for me personally in terms of paying attention. When I would look out at the audience and the person that I asked to put their mask on had taken it off by the time I'd gotten back to my chair or something like that, I would want to make sure we had a plan for how, if we were going to have people back, how we were going to enforce some of those rules, because it's on us to enforce it. And that's a challenging thing to do, to participate in a board meeting and enforce rules with 50 to 100 people sitting in the audience.
I do think we would have to have, I know somebody said, I'm not sure who, that we don't need to worry about capacity. I do think we would have to have a capacity limit, because we are still in a school building. We're still being asked to distance a certain way. So in some way, I do think we would have to cut back on our number and not be able to have, go ahead.
Well, and I think in a way, we're going to have probably a couple sets of rules, right? I don't want to be the mask police. I mean, we may need to do it not for a period of time, right? While we're in that, hopefully masks come off very soon. So there may need to be some things that we implement now, like, okay, what's our process for masks? What does that look like? And capacity, when these chairs are full, and obviously those would be temporary, the more temporary, the better. And then in the future, we wouldn't have to worry about those things. So I do think, there's a little bit of okay, what does this look like in the pandemic with a mask mandate? And then, when we can lift those types of requirements or considerations, then obviously we would do that. So I think that makes sense. And those are some of the things that I heard from districts that were a little bit of a challenge. I think if you have, as we design what works best for us, I think if we're very clear about those expectations anymore, as much as we possibly can be, so that everybody's understanding, I think it helps. The interesting thing with taking a certain number of comments is that, there could be a comment that's 10 seconds. There could be one that's 3 minutes. So, for me, that could be a number of comments, or it could be a time limit. I think it's also really critical to understand that as a board, we have a lot of leeway with public comment. I mean, that's why you see in what I put, there's so many different things. Nobody does it quite the same. And I think we've all agreed that it's a little bit of a, ungratifying process for public comment, because it is such a one-sided situation that we can certainly improve on. But as far as what a board is required to do with public comments, it's something as simple as accept comments electronically and go in the board packet. There are districts that don't do anything other than present them to the board because it's for the board information, and then potentially give a summary out of, we had this many comments on this topic opposed. I don't want to do that. I'm not saying I want to do that, but we have so much room to figure out what works best for us from something like that. So any comments, I want to be clear that any comments, if we were to decide there's a time limit or there's a number limit, would absolutely still go in a board packet that the board would see in its entirety. So even if we were to put limits on it, I think that's important. I also think there could be times where there's a really hot topic, and as a board, we would have the ability to say, hey, wait, we know this is really important. So we're going to allow more than 40 minutes or 20 comments or whatever that looks like. So I think it's also important to look and say, hey, there could be things that we need to be flexible on, and it's going to be a long night, but we need to hear everybody. So those are just my thoughts. There's just a lot to it. And as we do this, I really do want to craft something that's reasonable for staff. I don't think it's reasonable for Ms. Andre to accept comments up to 15 minutes before the board meeting. It just doesn't. I think, if I were to craft something, I would say, the latest anyone does this is 4 p.m. The city of Sherwood, it's 24 hours. For me, I think just giving people time and a little bit of space to do this right. So I would love to kind of craft, what do these pieces look like, and just do it right. Let's get this right. Let's make the expectations clear. Let's move forward. So those are my thoughts.
Madam Chair, I'd like to say too, that I think it would be really helpful for us to take some time so that I know staff is hearing this for the first time this evening too, or at least unless Director Thorne has met with them previously. I'm assuming not. If you have, please. Yeah, did you meet with staff in advance of this and go through this?
No.
Okay, so staff's hearing this for the first time. I'd really like them to be able to spend some time as a team and consult the members of the team that are expected to be here as part of their job duty, and really think about, we do have people back in here, what are the ways that we can manage crowd management and do that? Is that possible? How would we do that? Because we do have the 5 that are sitting up here regularly have agenda items or are actively involved in taking minutes or doing that work. So I want to be thoughtful that it may not be practical to have the current staff that's here, and I want them to be able to think through that challenge or any other challenges and be able to bring that feedback back. Maybe there's a work group that can be formed to kind of develop a proposal to bring back to this group to consider. I just think it would benefit from additional thought and work. I would certainly be willing to volunteer if that would be helpful.
Okay.
I,
Director Nyangaro?
sorry, I'm not sure if we should wait on this. I think the public is kind of looking for some answers, and they wanted to be back in September. So, spending more time talking about it, I just don't know if that's going to be what the public wants.
Okay, I appreciate that. My thought is, I don't think we have to have a work group. I don't think we have to make this a giant, long process. I really don't. What I would love, and I would like Director Thorne's input, is to take this information and, kind of digest it, not, and consider what other folks are doing, not as, we're not followers in Sherwood, we're not following. I don't mean it for that, but just to get other ideas of what might be possible. Just looking at the different 9 pieces. Okay, what do we want those to look like? And what do we need to have in place to bring folks back so everybody has a clear expectation who's going to do what? I don't think it has to be a big long process. I would like to do that and have something that is succinct at our next board meeting in December. That would be my plan, that we can. I don't think these discussions are that difficult. I don't think we're particularly far apart. But I would like to, just, as I said, digest it, have folks, we can gather a little input, anecdotally, and then put something together that we can make a decision on.
So would it be fair to say then that the goal of this board is to have a solution by the end of the year where we have our public, our constituents, our community here in this room with us?
Yeah, I think what the timing would be, coming back in December at our board meeting with, this is what makes sense for us, with input, with digesting. There could be other things that I don't obviously have on this list to consider. I want to do it right. And I want to, I just want to do it right. And I think, coming back and having that, hey, this is what looks good for us. Are we all on the same page, or are we on the same page as a group? We may not all agree, but is that what the majority wants? And then move forward with it. And that would look like, January 2022. Just based on that timing.
Madam Chair, I just want to make sure that part of the consultation is with the district staff. I think that's really important. I want to make sure that is a clear direction, that this cannot be a proposal that comes back without district staff input.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, board members were up here. We can't manage, the logistics of what's going on out there. And we obviously would need to consult and just make sure that we know whose job is what, or whose responsibility is what, or, those types of things. So definitely, I would agree that, we would need to do that.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to, kind of say, there's definitely some concerns that, that I'm hearing about bringing people back. And, I think I heard a few hypotheticals about some of the issues, but, I don't see any reason to not open it back up. And, if issues arise, we'll deal with those as they come, and learn from those and deal with those issues as we go. I don't see any reason why we can't handle it that way.
I agree.
I'm sorry, I didn't say that in the record, because everyone needs to feel safe being in this room. And respectfully, we did hear from people who didn't. And so we need to tend to those concerns as we open back up. And it may not be that intending to those concerns that we resolve every concern for everyone, but we need to listen and make sure that they've been heard, especially since we received a public complaint, and proactively put measures in place that will enable us to address the concerns that were raised. And then as Director Niangaro said, as additional issues arise, we address those as they come. But we need to be planful in advance because this is a public building and a public body.
Jessica, how many years have you been a board member?
Over 9.
So you've had a lot of board meetings.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So out of those 9 years and all of those board meetings, how often have you felt unsafe besides the one meeting in August?
None. Well, excuse me. I get to continue talking here since you asked me a question. That one meeting, and really the one before it, that was also a lot of inappropriate behavior by a number of audience members. Felt very different to me than the kind of audiences, both upset and friendly, that we have had before. I have never seen the public come in and point their finger and curse at board members from the audience, from the stand. I've never seen them point their fingers at our superintendent. I've never seen the kind of very aggressive behavior that I saw that night. This community is divided. It should not be. This board, this building is about kids. It's about our teachers and staff that are exhausted. It's about our kids that lost so much during COVID, and we have not spent nearly enough time as a board talking about their needs, about the things that we need to do to get them back to full readiness for what comes next. And so excuse me while I'm finishing, and then you're welcome to comment. It is about those things. It's not about standing up here and yelling at staff and yelling at school board members about things that are not happening in this district, or about fear, or about whatever it is. Welcome to provide public comment, not welcome to turn this into a rodeo show. That is not what this process and this building is for. And so I am absolutely appreciative of public comment. We have had difficult public comment. When we did boundary adjustments, the public comment was tough. It was not complimentary. It was tough. And there were issues for us to work through. When we have had to say goodbye to coaches for a variety of reasons, tough public comment. And that is as it should be. And I expected that there would be tough public comment about a mask mandate. I don't have any problem with that. I had problems with the other behaviors that were a distraction to this board, that were disrespectful to staff, and that made other members of the public feel unsafe for them or their students to be here. So I am all for, let's bring everyone back, but let's figure out parameters that make this a welcoming space for everyone, not just the ones that want to come in here and yell.
I believe you hit the nail right on the head when you said it's about the kids. With it being about the kids, we have to respect the parents' desire and need to be in this room and to talk to us. There are going to be times when they're angry. Yes, for the record, I do not support the yelling or the finger pointing either. However, we're talking about isolated incidents. We are not talking about, you can't laugh at that. I just asked you the question and you answered it. You've had multiple meetings and you said twice. So we're obviously not going to agree, and I appreciate you making your point. However, I largely disagree with the decision being made without our involvement in the first place. Secondly,
That wasn't my decision.
I'm well aware of that.
You're holding me accountable for. a decision.
Again, you're making assumptions. I am well aware of that.
Because you accused me of lecturing and yelled at me about it. So I don't appreciate that.
Okay, well, your perception is yours. Anyhow,
It is.
our community is important to us, and regardless of what you've heard, I know we both heard different things. Director Niangaro, Director Hawkins, Director Thorne, there's 3 board members here who have heard from the community members that they want to be here. And I believe that we owe that to them. We owe sitting here and listening to the hard stuff. That's the bottom line. This is a hot spot to be in. It's a hot seat to be in. We signed up to be in this hot seat. My guess is that there won't be as much yelling if their things aren't done to be yelled at for.
So we didn't do anything to be yelled at for. The governor made a decision about a mask mandate. Many people are here yelling about we're teaching CRT in our schools, and that's just not true. I appreciate you to have a different perspective, but it is in fact not true. So I'm not afraid of sitting in a hot seat. I've sat here for much longer than you have, ma'am. I am willing to sit here and listen to tough public comment. I'm willing to listen to people disagree with me. I'm totally fine with that. I'm not here for a popularity contest. I'm here for the kids. But I do think, regardless of all of that, we owe it to our community to make this a welcoming space, for it not to be a place where people blow up. Maybe that won't happen again. And if it doesn't, I am thrilled. I'm just saying, given our last couple of experiences with in-person people and what happened, we owe it to do some planning. I don't think that that's too much. You've heard from people saying that they want to be back. I haven't. I talked to a different segment of the community. This isn't just about one segment of the community. It's about the whole thing. So let's do some planning and we'll have everyone back in January. Let's figure it out. I don't think that that's unreasonable. I don't think that it was reasonable to assume that you could take an agenda item that was under information and discussion and try and push for a decision tonight. So I think this is a good process. I appreciate Chair Hecker putting it together. As we've had this conversation, I look forward to seeing what comes back in December.
Thank you. I'll end with saying that if your goal is to make people feel welcome in this building, that's not being accomplished by not letting them in this building. Thank you.
So I think we probably need to do a little bit more work behind the scenes. Because I really do feel strongly, we want to do this right. We don't want to end up in a situation. I mean, ultimately, we're in a pandemic with a mask mandate. The city of Sherwood is still virtual. Other people are still virtual. That doesn't mean I don't want people back. I just want to look at this and I want to do it right. I want all of us to do it right. I feel very strongly, just as the same reason that it's virtual, ultimately it is for the health and safety and security of everyone involved. I want everyone to feel that. I want people to feel welcome. I just think we have a little work to do to figure out how to do that right. So we don't end up in a pandemic struggling with masks and all of the things that just, take away and are disruptive. So with that, I would ask that we work on this. We come back with some really solid, good information to go ahead and move forward on in the future.
So just to make
I
it
do-
clear, in between now, oh, sorry, Duncan. I keep messing with you. In between now and next month, who is going to take the reins of, do you want Director Thorne to like draft a suggestion and then, or to get feedback first? Just so we know what the direction is between now and then.
There are a few ways we could do it. I mean, there's a spreadsheet here. We could highlight some things. We could compile some thoughts behind the scenes. If Director Thorne wants to take that on, that's fine, but she doesn't have to. If she doesn't want to do that, I would certainly be happy to gather information individually and put something together that whatever that looks like. I'd be happy to work with Director Thorne on that a little bit behind the scenes and see what we can do. So, but ultimately I would leave that up to her.
I would like to absolutely compile. I would like to welcome everyone here to send me their concerns and their suggestions, their ideas. And then we can go from there.
I appreciate you taking that on, and I would welcome that. I really do. I mean, it's a process, and there are definitely some things, I feel strongly about, like we've mentioned, the cutoff time, things like that. And just after talking to some of the other boards about some things that they've run into as they've tried to navigate this as well, I would love to take their best learnings so that we can know how to work with that and make people feel welcome and everybody in a good place. So I appreciate you taking that on. So thank you.
Chair Hecker, or Director Thorne, when would you like feedback from the group so that we are timely in getting that to you, so you have enough time to think about it, put it together? Or if you'd like to email us later, that's fine. I just want to be timely in my response.
Again, I appreciate that. So with that, unless there's further discussion, we will go ahead and move on to the SIA annual report. And
I just wanted, I'm
Ms.
sorry, I just wanted to,
yeah,
Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify
of course.
something. You know, I sensed that Director Adamson she felt like this was kind of a surprise, and she was somewhat caught off guard by what's going on here. But I just want the public to know that, you know, we get, prior to a board meeting, we get the agenda the prior Friday, you know, usually in the afternoon. And then we have probably 4.5 days with the agenda in our possession where we can ask questions or you know, ask for more clarification and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we do have the agenda and we're able to review it for about 4 or 5 days before the meeting.
And Director Nyandoro, I did review the agenda. I sent the board chair questions on Monday as per our process. I didn't hear anything about them. I read the agenda and I noticed that the only attachments were the current policies without markup. And so I really wasn't trying to be difficult. I wasn't trying to surprise anybody. I did send a list of questions because I didn't know what this was. And that is our process to do it that way. So I did follow process. Because I didn't hear anything back and there wasn't any additional detail in the agenda. That's why I felt surprised this evening.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we will move on to Mr. Bennett and the SIA annual report. Mr. Bennett, the podium is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chair Hecker. Is this on? Can you hear me okay? Okay. So I'll wait till the slides come up here. So tonight, we want to talk to you a little bit about the Student Investment Account Annual Report. This report is actually required by the Student Success Act. We'll talk about it. It's an annual report to both the board and the community that needs to be done annually. It is important to focus that this report focuses retroactively on the 2020 last year, 2020-2021 school year, and not on the current year. So that's what the report of this is, and we'll step into it. Tonight, we'll talk about a few different things. Why are we not? There we go. Some things we'll talk about, a little bit of background on this, since we have some new board members who may not know a lot about this important act passed by the legislature. We'll talk a little bit about our process with the community. We'll talk about our plan and just sort of what happened to this with the pandemic. So the student investment account, this was the most historic investment in public education in my time in the state of Oregon, for sure. I can't speak to what happened before that. It was part of the Student Success Act, was approved by the legislature in 2019. And the total investment of the Student Success Act was roughly $2 billion annually to education, a huge chunk of money, not annually, each biennium, $1 billion. And about half of that went to non-competitive grants in the student investment account. So half of the Student Success Act was the student investment account. That was $500 million to schools, about $3.9 million to Sherwood. And that is a large percentage of our budget and really a historic increase in our funding. The law, as with any funds, came with some specific parameters around it. There were 2 stated purposes for the funds. It had to be spent on one of these 2 things: meeting students' mental health or behavioral health needs, or increasing academic achievement, including a focus on reducing historical disparities in achievement. And the act talks a lot about the focal students of this act, students that have been traditionally underserved by our schools based on their outcomes. One thing about the law is it required substantial amounts of community engagement to take place. In the first round, this was done in the fall of 2019 is when fall of 2019, winter 2020. In our first round of stakeholders, we held 54 meetings with stakeholders around the district. That included staff, community members, parents, board members. We did a second round of needs surveys. We engaged in a strategic planning process. And it seems so foreign that there was about 35 or 40 of us packed into the community room at the Ridges, sitting 6 or 8 people at a table together for 4 or 5 nights, where we took all of this community engagement input from all of these things and put it into a rough draft of a strategic plan. Another way we took input into how to spend these funds was through our transformation advisory committees. For board members who might not know what those were, as we went through the bond process, we had 4 buildings that went through transformations. We had what's now Hawksview, we had the Ridges Elementary, we had what's now Sherwood Middle School, and we had this building. And so we had a transformation advisory committee for each one of those buildings. Each one of those met 6 or 8 times over the course of the school year and contained parents from those schools, in some cases, students from those schools, staff members, board members, district office staff members. So all of these different things. And then we had several board meetings where we discussed the elements of the act and what we were investing in over a period of time. And then we met with our school and district office administrators. And so over the course of about 6 or 8 months, we took gargantuan amounts, I don't know what the right word is, but just a constant stream of input from the community about what this should look like. And that was an important part of the act. And what emerged from that was, interestingly enough, there was a strong concurrence around mental and behavioral health. That came not only from the act, but that came out of our interest surveys with parents. It came out of our strategic planning process. Strong desire to work on mental health, and that included building staff, teaching staff, all of it. There were also some other things that came out, just STEM and CTE, music and the arts, some other academic supports, lots of things came out. You can see what these findings were. So we had an opportunity to make a historic investment, and we also had some different funds from what was called the High School Success Act, which was Measure 98, was a ballot measure passed that gave a certain amount of money per high school student to be spent on increasing graduation rates and some other different things. It was not fully funded in the first year because there wasn't the funding. One of the things the Student Success Act did was fully fund Measure 98. So when we proposed our investments, we looked at these 2 piles of money and 2 pots of money in different ways. And 32.5 FTE is full-time equivalents, but 32.5 staff member, that was what we proposed investing. That act was actually approved by the board. And you can take a look at some of the things that we were investing in with that 32.5 FTE. The other investments listed up there were things like PE and music teachers. We had a portion of a salary for a drug and alcohol counselor, some money for collaboration for staff, especially our special education IAs who work with kids every second they're here during the day. We needed some time for them to collaborate about how best to support those kids. So they need a little time to plan, things of that nature. And a big piece of this was avoiding existing layoffs. One thing that happened, and it's happened again in this biennium, is that the funding from the state did not meet our current service level. So we were not able to maintain our current service level. And so we used a good portion of our student investment account funds, as did every district I know of throughout the state, to maintain our existing staff members and then make 32.5 investments on top of maintaining existing staff. So those were our proposed investments. And then the pandemic hit. On March 11th, which was a day I'll honestly never forget. I think it was the day we realized that schools were about to close. And I'll just speak for me personally. I was so excited about the Student Investment Act and all the things we were going to be able to do. We had new schools opening. It was like really sort of the highlight of my career at that point in time. And between the time I turned in the packet and actually gave the presentation, the pandemic was looming upon us. It looked like schools were going to close. So on Wednesday, March 11th, the board approved the 3-year SIA plan for $3.9 million of new investments. And by the end of that week, schools were closed and the economy collapsed. So what impact did that have? Well, the revenue from the corporate activities tax is actually a gross receipts tax. It's the corporate activities tax that funds it. The revenue from that plummeted way below the forecast, and our allocation went from 3.9 to $1.28 million like that. And the good thing was, though, that the money we needed to cover our existing staff was just about the allocation we received. So it was sufficient to avoid layoffs, but none of those 32.5 FTE were invested in. The annual report requires that we talk about a few things with the board. Just jump in if you have questions along the way, by the way. One of the things was what progress we made despite the impacts of the pandemic. And so some things that we worked on, it was really important that we maintained our existing staffing, as I said. A lot of the staff that were paid for of our existing staff were mental health staff. That was one of the things that we could pay for under the act. So we helped our mental health coordinator, our behavior support team, which was having a huge impact, especially at the elementary level, and our elementary counselors. And we made progress in implementing a multi-tiered system of support, which was our overarching strategy. We did a presentation on that to the board in the spring about some details around that, but that is a high leverage, evidence-based strategy for school improvement, especially when you're talking about allocating new resources like mental health resources and academic resources. And so we made a lot of progress in that despite being in the middle of the pandemic, and are moving forward on that this year. There were two obvious barriers to process. One, schools closed and our focus obviously changed. We went from focusing on how to open in a hybrid model to developing a comprehensive distance learning, and back to focusing on opening in a hybrid model, and then to opening this year in even different conditions. It's been a constant change, and it's been a barrier to progress. And then obviously when you lose the funding for the positions, that's a significant barrier to a lot of your plans. And so those were two significant barriers that we faced. The act also calls for ongoing community engagement. One of the weaknesses of our original application that was noted for the student investment account is that we did not conduct empathy interviews in the first round of our engagement. We talked to people, we did surveys, we met with people, but we did not sit down one-on-one with people and ask them questions like we did in the empathy interviews we did last year. And so we conducted, I believe it was 81 empathy interviews last year as a team, of students, parents, staff. And so we really tried to keep that community engagement going, and we'll continue to do that this year. And we'll do a broader sense of community engagement as well as the empathy interviews over time as we move forward with this act. Yes, Director Adamson?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bennett. I just wanted to clarify that the empathy interviews that you're talking about are the empathy interviews that occurred through the Equity Visioning Committee, and those are the kinds of interviews that ODE is looking for us to do.
That's correct. Thank you for that clarification. Those were a part of our equity audit and our Equity Visioning Committee. The findings of those were presented to the board. The summary level findings of those were presented to the board. And that is exactly what the act calls for. It calls for empathy interviews, and a good portion of those to come from what they call the focal students of the act and their families. And so while we did have a broad base of families, we did also reach out to certain groups of students who are the focal students of this act. And finally, the other thing we need to report on is, how did we decide on our reduced investments? How did we make the decision to go from a $3.9 million investment to 1.28? For one, we went back to our community engagement findings, and that really called out mental health as being a top support. Most of the salaries we decided to pay for out of the act of our existing staff were mental health staff, counselors, mental health specialists, behavior support specialists, and the amount of funds we received roughly covered our budgeted shortfall. So it wasn't a decision where we were deciding which of our new investments to reduce. It was just, it almost came out exactly even. So that's how we made the decision. There was not much of a decision to make based on our financial reality, to be honest with you. And that's the end of the report tonight, just so people know that this will go up on the website as part of this process, and then a different version of this will be turned into the Department of Education as part of our annual process. Are there any questions?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to thank you for sharing that with us. I very much remember when all that money was going to be coming our way and the surveys and being so excited about all those possibilities. And I know that that was a really, it still is a heartbreaking thing for the school districts to lose that funding. So thanks for sharing with us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Yeah, that was truly heartbreaking, from a historic high to kind of a historic low, really, in a very short period of time.
Director Nyangaro, it looked like you were going to say something. Did you want to add to that?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't have anything to add.
Okay, just didn't want to miss you. Sorry. Director Adamson.
Yeah, I just want to confirm that these reports are ones that we'll continue to receive on an annual basis, just for us to measure our progress against the resources that we receive underneath the act.
I believe that the annual report is required. I know this one was. I believe it's every year, but I'm not 100% certain of that. But regardless, we will bring this back to the board, as this is something we'll need to be involved in. The board will need to be involved in over time. The plan that was approved was a 3-year plan, but as part of an ongoing process, we'll need to have board involvement. Just as a side note, the ODE is actually proposing combining one application for several different pots of money, which makes a lot of sense. And we'll see what I'll report back to you as that comes out. But that may shift how we do this a little bit. But Measure 98, this, and a few other grant sources that you all sort of have to plan together, but then are separate applications, putting it all in one umbrella, which makes a lot of sense to us. Title funds, et cetera.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Okay, with that, thank you, Mr. Bennett. We will move on to the district calendar process with a presentation from Mr. Emmert. Mr. Emmert, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Cordy, Board Chair Hecker and Board of Directors, and Ella. So as in the past, we're currently working on future district calendars. And because we'll be bringing some drafts before you in the next few weeks, we thought it would be helpful maybe to just share with you what the process looks like and what the parameters are that we have to stay within as we're building district calendars. So that really is the purpose of tonight. It's really just informational. And you are more than welcome. Christine, is there a reason why this isn't advancing? Thank you. You're more than welcome to ask questions as we go. Each year that we build a district calendar, we pull together a district calendar committee. We seek representatives from each of our collective bargaining units, in addition to reps from each level and district program. Each member of the committee is responsible for gathering feedback from their stakeholder groups so that we have a deep understanding of the needs of each group, and so that we stay within the parameters that we need to stay within. As we build district calendars, we need to remain within SEA, for instance, parameters. And as you can see on this slide, these are some examples of specifics that guide our building of the calendar. There need to be 190 contract days. 178 are designated as I have up here class days. That can be student contact, or in some cases, professional development. We can have up to 30 hours of professional development that count. The equivalent of 5 work days, and they need to be specifically placed within the calendar. 5 paid holidays, statewide in-service day, which is a non-contract day. And then, as I said, we can spread some professional development days within that calendar. OSEA's parameters are a little bit less time intensive. So when considering their parameters, really their calendars are unique to specific employee groups. And so we just really need to pay attention to the fact that our 12-month employees have 10 paid holidays and our less than 12-month employees have 5 paid holidays. Anytime we make a change that's significant within an employee group calendar, we work with OSEA to make those changes. So an example of another parameter is our required instructional hours. The state requires a certain number of instructional hours by either grade or level. So you can see what examples we have up here on this slide, what those look like. Instructional time is defined as time in which students are actively engaged in scheduled instruction, learning activities, or learning assessments, and they need to be working under the direct supervision of a licensed teacher. Things that do not count as instructional time are things like the passing time between class periods, recess in elementary school, non-academic assemblies, non-academic field trips, or things like study halls where there's no lesson being taught. Oops, I advanced too soon. For K through 3, we can count up to 60 hours of recess. So that can count kind of as some of their PE time. And then we can count, as I said before, up to 30 hours of professional development and up to 30 hours of parent conferences. We work hard to make sure that we stay within these instructional hours. It's tricky sometimes, especially for seniors who get out typically earlier than the rest of our students due to graduation. And yet they are required the most instructional hours. And so it really determines when we start school and when we end school. The kinds of requests we get from stakeholder groups, and these include community stakeholders as well, are things such as pay attention to holidays for various groups, schedule professional development during the first half of the year. Our teaching staff have found that to be much more helpful than having late professional development. Start after Labor Day due to family vacations, and yet others say start before Labor Day and end the year earlier. And so as you can see, we get really a variety of pieces of information. Continue to have grades 6 and 9 start one day ahead of other secondary grades. Those are the days where they have orientation. They come in and become more comfortable in the school without there being this massive humanity around them. Start kinder later than grades 1 through 5 and consider a soft start so that assessments can occur. Attach teacher work days at the end of grading periods to weekends when possible to provide adequate time for grading and filling out progress reports. Keep trimester 3 longer than trimesters 1 and 2 due to demands for teachers who have seniors and due to the fact that we have a lot of testing that happens third trimester. So as you can imagine, balancing those trimesters with all of these parameters can be a little bit tricky with weekends in there. Try to avoid adding PD to Thanksgiving week. Add as many days to winter break and Thanksgiving break as possible so families can travel. And we have found, in reality, it helps us to avoid excessive absences. Keep spring break a full week. Keep as many full uninterrupted weeks as possible throughout the year. Allow a full week between seniors' last day and graduation. And on the other hand, I hear reduce the amount of time between seniors' last day and graduation to increase instructional time for seniors. Create and adopt calendars, and this came from the board a couple of years ago, a couple years at a time rather than 1 year at a time so that our community has more time to plan in advance. And so when I bring drafts to you here in the next few weeks, I'll bring 2. I'll bring a draft for 22-23 and a draft for 23-24 for you to look at. And by the time I bring them to you, we'll make sure that we've met all of the parameters that we're talking about tonight. And then the way, once we have some drafts kind of in place that meet those parameters, I vet through our executive team. They've already seen what we've been working on up to this point. Committee members vet through SEA and OSEA, so they're gathering feedback on some of the topics we're talking about tonight. We have begun vetting drafts through building and district administration, and then be prepared because, as I said, we'll be reaching out to all of you in the next few weeks to put these drafts before you so that we can get your feedback and have ample time to make any necessary changes in things we might have missed before I bring this to the board meeting probably in January. When we've concluded the process, we'll bring, as I said, to the probably January board meeting for first read, and then you'll have a month to really think through that, gather any additional feedback from the community you might want to gather, and then I'll bring it back the following month for second read and hopefully adoption. Our goal is to, if possible, adopt it by February to give families a lot of time to plan in advance, people who live in our community, time to plan in advance. So that really is the process. And again, my hope is to just give you a deeper understanding of what that looks like prior to our meeting in the next few weeks. what questions you have.
I just wanted to ask you, mostly due to the comment we received earlier, but the question about community involvement. So I know it doesn't look like we have a community member on that team, but it sounds like you get a lot of community feedback. So how do you receive that, or how do community members share that if they want? It sounds like you already have a lot of feedback, but how do they share that if that's something they want to share or become involved with?
So I can't recall the year, but we actually surveyed the community some years back, and we had so many responses that were so varied that unfortunately, I think people felt like they didn't win if they didn't get what they thought was important in the calendar. So what we found to be more effective was to have our board members as liaisons. And then also we have so many staff members who are parents in the community who provide, that's where I get a lot of community feedback, really is through people who are teachers or classified staff who live in the community.
And just as a follow-up, sorry.
Oh, no, go for it.
Has there ever been consideration to having a community member on that team? I
We
don't know
have
if
had-
that's feasible or not.
Yeah, they're actually, and I would be very open to that. We've had board members. I know Jessica has served in the past. We've had board members in the past on, Sue has served. But I am always open to having one or two community members. We try to keep the group a manageable size so that we can make decisions. But I think that what we talk about is probably fairly informative for people. So I'm certainly open to that.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
As a former liaison to this committee, I went in with high hopes of really trying to, like, my big thing that I was concerned about was how do you align? I think at that time we had one in high school, one in middle school, and one in elementary. That one year was a lot of fun. But trying to align the conference days, right? So that we all take them at the same time, so that if the kids are home, they're all home together instead of one this week and one 2 weeks later. And I was, one of the things that I learned I was really surprised about is just all of the different requirements and the point in time in which this teacher group finishes this lesson so that it's meaningful for conferences. And if you do it 2 weeks earlier, that it'll align all the conference days, but then you won't really have anything to talk about in conferences. And I mean, just, it is really informational. And I think that a community member would learn a lot, but just finding somebody with the patience to really dig in and try and understand that a lot of the machinations of the calendar aren't just random. They're really challenging and difficult because of all of the different agreements and the pieces of the labor agreements that we have, and then the requirements from the state. And so it's just, it's more of a science than an art, was what I learned. And it was really fascinating. I do think it does help for us to have a good amount of time to be able to vet them, and then really encourage the public to take a look at them. And then my only other last comment is that I'd really hope that in 22, 23, we'll have a calendar adopted for that, and then 23, 24. But if we could get back to that kind of rolling 3 years ahead, that would be really great. I know we kind of backed away from that. We did that so that we were clear for the bond purposes, but then COVID but it would be great to be able to get back to that so that families just have lots of time to plan, to know that this year Thanksgiving is a full week and next year maybe not, so that there's not confusion or heartbreak. Oh, and then building in time for snow days. That's the other thing that's really fun.
Gosh, right, snow days. Don't say that out loud. Oh my goodness. So I just want to thank you. It's so helpful to get the calendar early and to have multiple years. I know that's something that you started when you took on this role, because as a longtime board member, you start getting calls, is there Thanksgiving vacation? What's going on? So it's great for planning and purposes, and I appreciate all your work on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will move on to the action items. And we've got a couple action items tonight. And the first one would appear to be me with OSBA Elections. So this is elections for folks to represent us and the Oregon School Boards Association. So there are a couple different types of positions: legislative policy, and then a standard position. And so we have 4 areas that we'll be voting on tonight. And 3 of the 4 roles they're running, folks are running unopposed. And then the last one is a two-person race. So Ms. Andrig, I wasn't sure if we have ballots for that or if we're just going to do we don't. Okay, that's fine. So what I would be looking for, so the first position is position 20. And Erica Lopez from Hillsborough has agreed to, she wants to be in that role. So I'd be looking for a motion.
Madam Chair, if it's of interest to the board, maybe we
You
can
all
take the three that are unopposed all together,
right?
unless there's an objection to any
Okay.
one of those.
Yeah, I would love to do that. So I will start over, and it will be position 20 is Erica Lopez out of Hillsborough. The legislative policy position 15 is Mark Watson. He's from Hillsborough. Legislative policy position number 16 is Becky Timchek. Okay, I knew that was going to be hard. Out of Beaverton. So those three are all running unopposed. So I would be looking for a motion for those three.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve OSBA Board Position 20 with Erica Lopez and Legislative Policy Committee Positions 15 with Mark Watson and Position 16 with Becky Chimchuk.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion, questions, comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, so those three candidates will represent us. I'm sorry, Mr. Director Nangaro, did you approve them? I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, there was a delay there. I voted nay.
On all three?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The motion will still carry then 4-1 with those representatives. Okay, for our last position, it is Legislative Policy 20, and we have two candidates, TJ Johnson from Gaston and Marvin Lynn from Tigard. Did everyone have a chance to kind of get their information? Oh, I skipped over. I apologize. I missed one. Okay. Sorry, I grabbed them off my phone. Well, let's go ahead and we will make a decision for TJ Johnson. So all those in favor of TJ Johnson, please say aye. So this is TJ Johnson from Gaston, and then the next vote would be for Marvin Lynn of Tigard. So we will, do I have any votes for TJ Johnson from Gaston? All those in favor of TJ, aye? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that's two for Mr. Johnson. Okay, then we'll move on to Mr. Lynn from Tigard. Do I hear any votes? All those in favor of Mr. Lynn from Tigard, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Okay, so that would be 3 votes for Mr. Lynn and 2 votes for Mr. Johnson. So Mr. Lynn will be our representative for legislative policy number 20. Okay, going back to one of the candidates that I missed, and I apologize, there is a board of directors position 15. We have a candidate from Beaverton, Ms. Susan Greenberg. All those in favor of Ms. Greenberg, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, so that motion will carry. Ms. Greenberg will represent us. That is a 3-2 vote. And with that, we have covered our OSBA election process. So we will move back to Mr. Bennett, who will present the overview curriculum for second read. Mr. Bennett, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hecker. As you know, last month, we brought to you for first read curriculum through Orbed, which is from the Florida Virtual School. We put it up for first read. I did get one question from a board member if there were any comments on this, and to summarize those comments, and if anybody requested to read it. Director Thorne did actually ask for a copy of or access to the curriculum and was able to read that, but we did receive no comments and no other inquiries from the public on that curriculum. Just wanted to follow up on that. If there are no questions, I would like to put this up for a vote for adoption tonight.
Hear a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the Orbed curriculum as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any comments, discussion, questions related to the adoption? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. That's 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you for your help, by the way, Mr. Bennett, in providing that.
Okay, so thank you all so much for participating in the meeting this evening. And again, I would just like to remind everyone, tomorrow is Veterans Day. So if you have a moment to thank a veteran or reflect on what their service means to all of us, I think that would be important and well received. So with that, we will be back back in a week, next week, because of the Thanksgiving holiday for a work session on November 17th. So with that, we're